Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at some of the laws of living in Deuteronomy chapters 21 through 25 in our continuing study of the book of Deuteronomy. We come to that last section. We're in that area related to the last 6 commands, and we talk about qualifications for leaders and issues of war and peace and governmental righteousness. And now we have just some general laws of living. We could almost say this comes under the umbrella of, again, the last 6 commandments, and it's very practical. So, first of all, there's the law of the firstborn, Deuteronomy chapter 21, beginning verse 15. If a man has 2 wives, the one loved and the other unloved, and both the loved and the unloved have borne him sons. If the firstborn son belongs to the unloved, then it shall be in the day he wills what he has to his sons. He cannot make the son of the loved, the firstborn, before the son of the unloved, who is the firstborn. You say, well, how can you make somebody the firstborn if they're not the firstborn? What that's saying is that you can't give him the privilege of firstborn, the inheritance of the firstborn, which would be the double portion, or basically the lion's share. You have to, right is right. And notice what that's doing. It's saying what Jacob did in giving Joseph and treating Joseph as if he was firstborn, that was wrong. Don't be like Jacob. Don't do that again. Verse 17, but he shall acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the unloved, by giving him a double portion of all that he has. For he is the beginning of his strength. To him belongs the right of the firstborn. Just because it was done at an earlier time a different way doesn't mean it's right. And so we're not necessarily to look at the actions of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and saying, that's the way we're supposed to do it. No. Because there were times when the patriarchs showed partiality. And God says, I'm calling you not to follow in their footsteps in those regards. Now, we have the law of the rebellious son in chapter 21, verse 18 through 21. Here it is. If any man has a stubborn and rebellious son, who will not obey his father or his mother, and when they chastise him, he will not even listen to them, then his father and mother shall seize him and bring him out to the elders of a city at the gateway of his hometown. Notice it's assuming that they had gateways, this laws of the land. And they shall say to the elders of a city, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. It's not just that he forgot to take out the garbage. This is something. It's an ongoing pattern. Verse 21, then all the men of his city shall stone him to death. That's severe, and it's supposed to be. So you shall remove the evil from your midst, that evil which can be a cancer. Notice God had been relentless when it came to driving out the Canaanites, and he's just as relentless in driving out the evil from their own midst. And all of Israel is to hear of it and fear. It's not going to have to be done a lot, because if you carry that out, then there will be a culture, an appropriate culture, can I say, of fear. That brings us to the law of execution, verse 22. If a man has committed a sin worthy of death, and he's put to death, and you hang him on a tree. Now, that's not saying to do it, but if you do that, here's the part of the law. This is the situation that's taking place. Verse 23, his corpse shall not hang all night on the tree, but you shall surely bury him on the same day, for he who hanged is accursed of God. Hanging upon a tree was considered to be a curse and a defilement, because notice the rest of it, so that you do not defile your land, which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance. You remember the story of Jesus. That's why, as he died, soldiers came to make sure that he was dead, and they drove a spear through his side just to make sure he really wasn't faking it. But then the body was removed before sundown, so that there would not be this defilement on the land. Notice, the one who hangs is accursed. So that Jesus became a curse for us. taking our curse upon himself on the tree. Next we move to gender roles, chapter 22, verse 5. Here it is, 22:5. A woman shall not wear a man's clothing, nor shall a man put on woman's clothing. Now it doesn't say what that is, because I suppose styles can change from year to year. But whatever is woman's clothing, that's for women to wear. And whatever man's clothing, that's for men to wear. For whoever does these things is an abomination. That's not a word that you use lightly. It's not just, that's ceremonial unclean. This is an abomination to the Lord your God. God made the genders. And those each have a role to fill. And that's appropriate. We move now to chapter 22, verse 8, safety and liability. Chapter 22, verse 8, when you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof, so that you will not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone falls from it. A house, if it had some way for someone to go up onto the roof, and I think that's what's intended here. Sometimes you'd have we would call it a high porch or something like that. There was to be a low wall, a parapet around that roof, so that somebody wouldn't fall off by mistake. It was a safety feature, and that's mandated by the law. I live in South Florida, and in South Florida there's lots of swimming pools, and there are laws on the books of most cities, if not all of them, that each swimming pool is to have a fence around it with a child-proof gate, so that a little child won't inadvertently wander into the pool and fall in and drown. And it's the same principle that we saw here in the law. Next, there's laws about mixed and unmixed things, and here I think we are getting to that ceremonial idea, and yet it's setting forth the principle. Here's the law, verses 9 through 11. You shall not sow your vineyard with two kinds of seed, or all the produce of the seed which you have sown, and the increase of the vineyard will become defiled. You shall not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Keep things equal that ought to be equal. You shall not wear a material mix of wool and linen together. And it's not that there's something sinful about wool and linen when they get together, but it's to be a reminder that you keep things in their proper place, that there's an appropriateness to it all. Even in the way you plow, in the way you dress, these are to serve as reminders. Next we have the law of the vow, verses 21 through 23. Verse 21, when you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it, for it would be sin in you, and the Lord your God will surely require it of you. If you promise something to God, a vow, then keep your vow. Now, on the other hand, however, if you refrain from vowing, it won't be sin. So, when in doubt, don't vow. Don't vow unless you know you're going to fulfill it. Verse 23, you shall be careful to perform what goes out from your lips, just as you have voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised. It's funny because a lot of times my wife or my daughter would ask me, are we going to do this? And my answer typically is, well, we'll see. That might be my plan, but we'll see. And they sort of didn't like that "we'll see" very much, but it was because I didn't want to vow and then not pay it. Verse 24 and verse 25, we have the law of the field. Verse 24, when you enter your neighbor's vineyard, then you may eat grapes until you're fully satisfied, but you shall not put any in your basket. So, if you happen to be wandering through somebody else's field, there's some grapes and you're hungry, and it's okay for you to pick some and eat some, but you can't start harvesting his field. When you enter your neighbor's standing grain, then you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not wield a sickle in your neighbor's standing grain. It's okay to grab a handful, and that allows both the regular sort of wandering through somebody's vineyard, but it also allows for the poor to come in. And this was their form of Social Security. This was their form of, I guess we could say, welfare. We have, starting in chapter 24, we have a law of divorce. Chapter 24, verse 1, when a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some indecency in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out from his house, and she leaves his house and goes and becomes another man's wife. And notice so far, there's not the command yet. This is just the situation. It's not saying, go divorce your wife. It's not saying if you divorce, it's okay to go get married to somebody else. What it's saying is when those things take place, and they will, when those things take place, and if the latter husband turns against her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her to be his wife, and this is still setting up the situation, here's the part of the command, verse 4, then her former husband who sent her away is not allowed to take her again to be his wife, since she has been defiled. For that is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord your God gives you as inheritance. So that if there's been a marriage and then a divorce and a remarriage to someone else, then you can't go back to that original marriage. That's been broken. It's been broken by that secondary marriage. Now, if there's a divorce and they're apart, but then they come back together without an intervening marriage to someone else, that's okay. In fact, I would say that's a good thing. I've known a number of situations where there was a couple that were married and for some reason something happened and the marriage broke apart, but then God sent a healing, or there was a repentance or a change of heart or something, and they came back together. And we rejoiced and we're so glad because it was as it should be. But a remarriage breaks the possibility of having a restoration. And so perhaps we ought to be careful in passing that remarriage. And notice I'm not saying it's not allowed, because that's not what the passage says. But what's not allowed is coming back and reformulating that original marriage. We have some other general laws now. Chapter 24, verse 5, when a man takes a new wife, he shall not go out with the army, nor be charged with any duty. He shall be free at home 1 year, and shall give happiness to his wife, whom he has taken. There's to be a 1 year honeymoon. That doesn't mean he doesn't work at all, but it means that he is going to be a stay-at-home, yes, working in the field and so on, but he's not going to be going out to warfare or some other thing that takes him away from the home. Chapter 24, verse 6, no one shall take a handmill or an upper millstone in pledge, for he would be taking a life in pledge. That is, you're not to take that which a man uses for his livelihood in order to pay a debt, because you're basically killing him. You're taking away his ability to support himself and his family. Verse 7, if a man is caught kidnapping any of his countrymen, of the sons of Israel, and he deals with him violently or sells him, then the thief shall die. So you shall purge the evil from among you. Sort of straight up and straight down. Kidnapping and selling somebody into slavery, or that was a capital offense. Verse 16, fathers shall not be put to death for their sons, nor shall sons be put to death for their fathers. Everyone shall be put to death for his own sin. Is it saying there's never a culpability? Yes, there might be, but you're responsible for your own actions. A law of self-responsibility. Verse 4, chapter 25, verse 4, you shall not muzzle the ox while he is threshing. It's interesting that Paul takes this principle, this law, and he applies it not just to oxen, but he says that's the reason that you pay your pastors. Now, notice in the picture, these oxen have muzzles on them to stop them from bending down and grabbing a bite of the of the wheat that they've been threshing. They're pulling something heavy over the wheat to grind it up, and they're not allowed to eat. And the muzzle is there, and notice I can see some ribs on the oxen. They're sort of skinny as a result. And God says, no, they're allowed to participate in the fruit of their labor. In the same way, those who have spiritual authority within the church, those leaders in the church, have the right to participate in the physical remuneration of their labors. That is, we typically pay a pastor as we're able, and we take care of his physical needs. Verses 13 through 15, you shall not have in your bag differing weights, a large and a small. You shall not have in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall have a full and just weight. Remember, this is spoken in the days. They did not have minted coins. They didn't have paper money, coin money. And so everything was weighed. And you can see where an unscrupulous salesperson might have a heavy weight if it's going to be in his favor, or he might have one that looks like a heavy weight but it's actually lighter if it's going to be what he's paying out, and so that he finds a way to cheat the person with whom he's dealing. And you're not to have these differing measures, a large and a small. You're to have a full and just weight, and you shall have a full and just measure, in order that your days may be prolonged in the land which the Lord your God gives you. Now that reminds us of the fact that God has a fair weight. He doesn't show partiality, and his justice was fully carried out against us, but put upon Christ, so that the cross becomes the place where the justice and the grace of God meet, and the just demands of the law were carried out on our behalf.